Okay, so welcome everybody. And yes, this is our little transmission for the year, weaving Vedic, Dreamspell, and traditional Mayan Chokil astrology. And yeah, I love giving these transmissions because there's a lot, as you know, that we find in between. I'm not going to talk about what non-dual astrology is because I think everybody on this call knows. If you don't know what it is, there's a video on my YouTube which explains. And I really believe this triangulation is giving us these deeper nuances and insights into collective karma and dharma. And in many ways, this evolution to what we might call the golden age, which is something that vanguards like Khenpo Rinpoche, who's a Tibetan Rime master, an unbiased master of Kali Chakra, he believes that by 2033, we can really enter into a new timeline. And I've researched the time up to 2033, and I concur. So today we'll have a little bit of that as part of the backbone, because I didn't look for it. It's showing up. And so as we progress later, hopefully some insights that you'll maybe not see in just one lineage of astrology, you're going to hopefully get some clues. And what I would say is that this year, and maybe you'll all just be like, right, I've got what I need, I'm going to go now, I don't have to listen to this. But basically, everything is a process and a journey. Seeing the journey of what's happening, it's like a story that unfolds in front of us. And if we're looking, thinking, is there going to be a golden age? Can we help to make that happen by 2033? There are some really deep markers in this year's astrology that people who are already on a path of sorts are going to find very lucrative to their own awakening, to their own dharma. And it's almost like then there will be other tiers of people. I'm not saying anybody's better than anybody else, but it's just about when karma ripens. That journey is going to deepen over the coming years. But this is a very interesting year. And some astrologers will say this year is going to be a challenging year. And there are definitely some things to be aware of. But I think that a lot of us are now looking and seeing that COVID brought so many gifts, the timing, the astrology. It was a necessary catalyst to where we are now. And so I'm not really going to go too much into depth about what might be, is there going to be a financial collapse or any of that? Because if you got as far as being in this presentation, your focus in life is not necessarily about that. And if you know there's some rocky days coming up and in certain times, knowing about it helps you, and you actually can use it tantrically to transmute or to weave with what you need. And this is why these strains of astrology, particularly Vedic astrology, came through, was to help us to mitigate craziness and to be able to do our dharma. So I just want to open space right now, just giving gratitude and calling in the energy of the celestial bodies. I want to give gratitude to the rishis, and here we have Sri Agastya, one of the main rishis in this picture. I just want to call upon the rishis, give gratitude to them and ask them for the guidance in this presentation. Giving gratitude to the day keepers of the Mayan lands, and also to Mark Elmy, my teacher in the traditional Mayan system. And finally, giving gratitude to Jose Arguelles and the advocates and channelers of the Dreamspell calendar. I finally want to give gratitude to Ganesha, the patron deity of Jyotish, the science of light. Om Shrim Ganganapataye Namaha. Om Shrim Ganganapataye Namaha. Om Shrim Ganganapataye Namaha. So welcome, everybody. Okay, so today, I just want to say, these things, this could take a year just to explain. So what I obviously have had to decide on certain things that we'll speak about today that I feel are markers and are possibly most symbolic for our relationship to the outer world rather than our inner world. And when we're doing astrology, of course, we all have unique karma and unique blueprints and a unique chart. And at the moment when I'm doing these sorts of broadcasts, it has to be looking at where we can see threads of correlation. We can see things that might come up for the collective, just like COVID was a collective thing. I can't give you all the exact insight that you need because that would need me to look at your chart. So because of that, that's why I look at certain things. So today I'm going to be looking at key dates in the Mayan and the Dreamspell calendars and the year lords of each of those. Because when we look at the year lord, we get a feeling, is it going to be an activator year? Is it going to be a difficult year? Are our processes going to be deep? Are they going to be ancestral? Are they going to be yin? What's happening? Okay. And I'll decode those a little bit. And then I'm also going to look at the Venus-Saturn conjunction that's coming up. And this is something I'll be talking about in the next year in a deeper way. And this is something we're going to do an eclipse journey on in March. There are things I was getting downloads about in recent months that perplex a lot of people at the moment about this kind of superficial spirituality that's around. And knowing that it's all perfect in its own right. And actually, these Venus-Saturn conjunctions to me are the markers of the karmic journey out of that for many people and the stepping into a higher sense of priestesshood or priesthood on the planet that really is sacred activism and really is taking our responsibility as Shambhala warriors. So it feels really lovely. It feels like this is going to become a larger sharing, especially next year. We're going to be doing some works in different countries to help people usher this in, because next year it's a lot more pertinent to a very big parting of the waves in many ways and a separation of, are you going to stay superficial or are you going to get really spiritual? Okay. And so we already have a marker of that this year, and I'm going to talk about that a bit because this is something that's really showing up in the stars. And I believe is a massive key to 2027. Now, in short, we have people who work with the human design system who are calling 2027 the rave mutation, and they see this whole new bunch of magic kids coming through. We have some magic kids on the call today with Chrissy, and actually the characteristics of the magic kids, the rave mutation, is already here. We already see it in what is classed as neurodivergent with a lot of people. But there seems to be this whole new genetic shift that's happening in 2027. And I'm doing a lot of work with the Mexicans and Quetzalcoatl and the Fuego Nuevo, which is also prophecy for 2027, which also sees a new genetic code coming through. So these Venus-Saturn conjunctions are opening gateways for the space holders for this mutation, okay? And that is us, the people here listening to this transmission, really, in many ways. Okay, then I'm going to go into the karmic nodes, Rahu and Ketu, and talk about the eclipses, because Rahu and Ketu are connected to the eclipse. As Jupiter is one of our big planets, big slow-moving planets, it's not as slow-moving as the outer planets, but you know, Jupiter's our great expander, our great benefic. We're going to look at Jupiter's movements. And what is different to Western astrology, we're going to look at the nakshatras that Jupiter is going to transit through. And nakshatras are constellations that the planets can be sitting in that have extremely defined characteristics unto themselves and their own set of mythology. And so it means that we get a fine-tuned reading of the energies of a planet meeting that constellation, which also helps to see the evolutionary astrology, the way Vedic astrology works, and the narrative that's coming out through, say, the great benefic rubbing across a certain constellation. And then we're going to look at it as well with Saturn, the master of time, the lord of karma, the planet that likes to slow us down to keep it real. So we're going to look at those, and we're also going to look at when those planets are retrograding. And then, because it's helpful for you all, I will do a little bit of a synthesis through January, February, and March. I'm not going to go too much into January because you can get that on my YouTube. But I'm going to show us the emerging journey there. And then we're going to do a little bit of a detailed discussion on April. And then we're going to look at some key things that are coming up later in the year. And then I'm just going to give you an overall synthesis of what I feel is coming up this year. Okay, so In Mayan astrology, we are coming to the end of the year, okay? And so in the Mayan calendar, in their year journey, we're moving out of an 11 year. And it's interesting because in Tibetan Buddhism, we are going into New Year on the 10th, 11th, and 12th of February. So there's still this New Year feeling that we are getting this year, which, because of the particular astrology we have this year, we actually have a New Year feeling. And so that's going to continue into February, because you're going to have that sense of that in February with the Mayan astrology and the Tibetan astrology. And so we've been in 11 and down in the bottom right, we have this find your path picture. And so 11 is, in the Mayan system, 11 is seen as wandering. It's trying many things out. It's maybe like going places but not quite knowing why you're going. So it's quite a journey with the divine and the unseen forces. And it's not seen as one of more tangible numbers. It's seen as problematic for that, but it actually has wisdom, because it's a little bit like a dot-to-dot picture that you don't know what you're doing until you put all the dots in. So this year kind of meant that a lot of people have been trying things out. Now, 11 also it transfers into having the idea of liberation or dissolving from something when we look at it in its dream spell counterpart. And a Mayan priestess once told me that 11 can often mean that you've got a karma around certain social groupings, or sometimes just the people who aren't the right people showing up, not quite having the right soul grouping, the right people to do your work with. And that they have to learn to be discerning with who they're working with. So when we apply that to and is like the path we're taking, this means that we may have been experimenting with many pathways, and there's a sacred process of helping us to eliminate it so that we're going to get more real with our true pathway. Okay, so that's coming to an end. That's coming into its next part of its evolution. And so people may have found that there are old friendships, things that have kind of served their time, and that some things are just dissolving, and there's some stuff sticking and there's some stuff going, okay? And then as the new year begins, we come into a 12 year, and it's 12 Noch. And Noch is very much about wisdom. It's got a connection to the earth, and it's got a connection to practical wisdom. So if we were going to look at intuitive wisdom versus wisdom and intelligence that's gained through, or I should say knowledge that's gained through reading books, which is more masculine in some ways, Noch holds that more masculine energy in a way. And number 12 is very, very balanced. It's the last of the even numbers as we go. We finish on 13. And so a number 12 person or energy has embodied the knowledge from that wandering, and it's become a balance. It's in the dream spell system, it's crystalline, so it's impenetrable in many ways, in a way that it knows itself. It's got all the tools it needs. So that's very reassuring, that we see this beautiful journey from trying things out. And if we look at a lot of people on the spiritual path, there's this sense of sweetie shop spirituality and people going here and going there, but there's very ungrounded approach. And what we may see more of this year is people starting to ground the knowledge and to earth it, okay? And to possibly apply themselves more. You know, we have to have that period where we're just seeing what's resonating, and we're going through that university of life and meeting people, and there's this fascination. And then there's the point where we know, you know, this is sticking for me. I'm going to show up for this. So that may ground a lot better this year. And it may mean on the collective, especially when we look at where Rahu is this year over a lot of spirituality, that people are, especially even now as we're leading into this, I think people are going to start to look at getting more into the roots of things and grounding the knowledge, and it not just being fickle. which is really, really good. Okay. So I'm going to lead on now to the Dreamspell astrology. I'm just going to sit for a little minute just to let us ground some information ourselves. Okay. And so in the Dreamspell calendar, we have several things that take place. So we have these 260-day cycles, which are seen as very tangible beginnings. And we are, oh, I think I've written it somewhere else. Well, I'll talk about the galactic spins. Oh no, I've got galactic spin here, 8th of July. That's really interesting this year, because by having the galactic spin starting, so a whole new 260-day cycle starting the 8th of July, the new galactic year also begins in July. So we're going to have another set of the cycles beginning at that time. And the energy of this galactic year, which is going to really last deeply until the 24th of July, it kind of sits in a day out of time on the 25th of July. And then the new galactic year begins on the 26th of July. So this year energy that we're currently in is White Overtone Wizard. And Wizard is seen as the shaman. It's connected to Jaguar medicine, and Jaguar medicine is feminine. It's a mother-like energy. It's connected to the sacral chakra in many forms of shamanism. And the Jaguar as a totem is very protective. It also transforms things. And it's also very evocative of nature and setting up our space in nature. So wizard people often have an affinity to doing earth work and, you know, doing things at stone circles, or their magic being in the land. But also some of the key words about wizard are receptivity and timelessness. And as a female feminine sort of archetype, this is this thing that we have that's lacking in the Western world because of these outmoded patriarchal constructs. And I'm not saying all patriarchy is bad, I'm saying some of it's outmoded. The over yangness of everything that we really know has to come to an end. This year is really very much about a transition. And the last series, the eclipses of last year, many people found that what they were working on was their own relation to the death of the outmoded part of the patriarchy, the over yangness within their systems. There were very miraculous things happening for people. And so those were the teachings of those last eclipses for many people. There was a relationship to the changing of the institutions, the changing of the rights of women, and many things. And what's interesting is we're now in this energy that's number 5, Overtone Wizard. And therefore, there's this need to now understand the yin receptive part of us that is part of each of us. We are all masculine, feminine, yin, yang. And interestingly, Overtone, number 5, is about having to work at things. And I remember when these days first started, so in July, I saw people just getting sick for no reason. And it was because they're trying to be too young. They're in the wrong setting. They're in an institution that's holding on to the wrong values, and they're getting knocked out. I know organizations who've had to reshuffle their whole strategy to change. And they're not even aware of this astrology. And so I don't think they've completed the process yet. But there's a lot of reshuffling going on. Okay. And this is, if you look, you'll probably find like, oh yeah, I've been having to really look at my balance with rest and doing. And you may find there's times where you've got a little cosmic slap because you didn't rest, or you didn't dream, or you didn't take a step back, process or meditate. And that's part of the hallmark of this year that's finishing in July is, yeah, you're going to get taken out if you don't get the cosmic order balance, right? So I really do encourage for the next 6 months to keep looking at your self-care strategy and making sure it's in there. Okay. And then on the 26th of July, our year lord is Blue Rhythmic Storm. Okay, now I remember some storm years, what I was doing. And I was piloting projects that were very yang, holistic trauma healing pieces of work. And they were more yang than I'd normally work with things like trauma. And I really got this deep guidance. We had to push through stuff. And we were doing like a lot of collective breath work and collective quantum sessions. Very deep work we did in Manchester. And that was during a storm year. And I said to people, it has to be really yang this year. It's just how it is. And people coming going, I know I've got to do the work. And there were these massive disclosures and big things happening. And it was just one of those years where it was like, got to grab it and do it. And so storm is, as storm says, you know, it's like a purge. It's going to clean us, but it can be like a baptism of very heavy water. And so it has a ferocity to it sometimes. But with that, it brings self-generation and it catalyzes new growth, okay? Because the year after, it's a seed year. So it's getting the ground ready to sow new seeds. Now, what I would say is beneficial is that it's a number 6 year, so it's even, it's balanced. So it's what's interesting is in the Mayan system, it's coming into a 12 year, and we've got the rhythmic is number 6, and the rhythmic is seen as the most balanced of the numbers. And in many ways, it's non-duality as well. So it's reassuring. It's like, it's not going to be like, when it's an activator year, it's an odd number. It can be really full on. So I think that time is beneficial, that there's a balancing to the purge, okay? And there's a non-dual energy to it. And what I really tuned in on was that, yeah, look at this eclipse journey we had with the relationship to the patriarchy. And then we're coming into this working at our yin. And now we've got the number 6. It's like there's a purge. But I really do feel that everything that we speak of the cosmic union within, the tantra of balancing our masculine and feminine, I feel that there's a portal for those who want to step into it to start to truly realize that as early as July. If you work on your yin receptivity and getting the balance. Because, you know, if we're too yin, we become what do you call it? Like a doormat, you know, and people just walk all over us. If you become too yin, you become so apathetic that you don't, you know, that's not going to be a Shambhala warrior. There has to be sacred activism, and we have to find our fire. So I feel that there's going to be this great energy that's going to come, that's going to clean things up and bring the balance back. And yes, it may not necessarily always be pleasant, but it's going to bring growth. And the good thing is that it is even. Whatever way it's going to catalyze us is more balanced than it could be. And so just understand that it could be more awkward and more uncomfortable. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit now about the karmic nodes. So in Vedic astrology, we call them Rahu and Ketu. If it was Western astrology, we would call it the North Node and the South Node. And so the North Node is Rahu and the South Node is Ketu. Rahu, so the story is, I'm not going to give the whole story, but the story is there was this cosmic serpent, Naga type Asura being. And it basically wanted to get immortality. And the Asuras are not friends with the Devas. So the Asuras are more cheeky and naughty, and the Devas are more like transcendental, well, more goody two-shoes, sattvic, yeah? And anyway, basically this serpent was a little bit cheeky, and there was the Amrita was being given out by the gods, and so the Devas were in the queue to get the Amrita, the beautiful nectar of immortality, and the serpent like dressed up as somebody else, which I love the naughtiness. So it dressed up as somebody else, and it got its drink, and just as it was swallowing the Amrita of immortality, I can't remember if it's Vishnu, but one of the main deities noticed and chopped it in half, okay? And then it's become two sides of this giant serpent, and it's immortal. So Rahu is the head that's really greedy and insatiable and quite delusional, and it's our future part of ourself. It's the bit that leans forward because it just wants everything. And then K2 has got no head, and K2 is our past life knowing. So K2 already did something in past life. So it's just like, yeah, I don't need to do that. I already did that, which is not true. Because so K2 has a beautiful spiritual property because it doesn't care for things in the materialist way that Rahu does. K2 is seen as the renunciant, and it's connected to moksha, to liberation from samsara, because it's not wanting loads of money. It doesn't care. It's got no head. But there are teachings about our K2 because sometimes it brings this confusion. It can mean that we have a loss of identity around things, which can be good, but it can also be challenging. It also means that often the things that we think we know from a past life, we can be a little bit apathetic about and ambivalent for quite a long period of time. And then we suddenly realize that there are things we have to learn in this particular body about that house that it's sitting in our chart. So Rahu just wants everything all the time. And Rahu is that part of us that, you know, I really like to sum it up often when you see people go through these crazy karmic relationships where they are like, oh yeah, this person, and they're really bad to me. And, you know, they're a total narcissist. And yeah, I'm going to go out with them. And you're like, what? And then of course they're kind of like in those shows where you know you're a zombie or a person who's been hypnotized and wandering around like this, and they just I have to do the thing. So that's Rahu. It makes them go to do the thing, and then it's a nightmare. It's not always a nightmare, but it could be a real nightmare. But then they learned something they had to learn, and so Rahu and Ketu are totally unpredictable. And they teach by kind of deception. They both have their own flavor of deception. And it's good because if we try to, we can play some of the planets a little bit better because we know their qualities. But there's this slippery side to Rahu and Ketu that's just great because you can't predict it. And we all have it. So we all have those moments where we just go into fantasy realm and decide to do something really stupid or whatever. And obviously, as we get older, those mature and we understand why they're there more, but they're always giving plot twists. And there's a beauty in that because the unseen is a great teacher. And these nodes do not have form, okay, but they're energetic. So they are great teachers. And so where they are placed in our own chart and as they are going round the zodiac, is really, really important for us. And as I say, Rahu's going to be more like, what's the future? What we really insatiable about. And then K2 is a little bit more like, yeah, there's a past life. There can be a past life karma we're learning about with something. And then we might not get it until maybe later on in the transit, okay? Because it's not going to look at it properly and then it may mature. And so at any given time, they're polar opposites to each other. So you can see them as parts of a seesaw. And like anything, by being polar opposites, they are actually both the same thing in when you reconcile that. So the journey that we take through any eclipse journey, because the eclipses are marking where they're going in many ways, this will be part of our journey for 18 months because Rahu and Ketu will change signs every 18 months. So where they're placed at this moment is going to be important for everybody. It will be different because of the placements in your chart. You might even have it brushing up on your natal Rahu and Ketu, which can be very, very strong, or whatever house it's in is going to have relevance for you. And that's why it's good to look that up or get a reading. So right now, and until around May 2025, we have Rahu in Pisces and Ketu in Virgo. Okay. So Rahu Pisces is the most spiritual, intuitive, watery placement, okay, the house. And Rahu, you can see where this could go. And I want to say last year I was talking quite a lot about the Guru Chandal Yoga because we had Jupiter and Rahu sitting together, which was, some people were calling it stupidity yoga. And because if it hit the wrong way, it could mean that people did some really outlandish offerings or just didn't ground their downloads and went a little bit too excessive and didn't actually channel their energies properly. And it's almost like the continuation of that is now that Rahu's gone into Pisces, which is about spirituality, there's going to be a lot of people having an insatiable drive for intuition, spirituality, all of those things. Okay. Now, as you can see, because Rahu, remember, is the one that can lead us through deception, if we're not aware that it can be leading us down the garden path, we could definitely have a lot of new saviors this year. Okay, we have a lot of new messiahs, a lot of new chosen ones, and all of those things, because people who are not grounded in their energetics, who've not done their work in the lower chakras, they'll just feed off the ego. Okay, because they are actually not grounding it, right? So that's something to be careful about. But also, in terms of preparing for a golden age, it's a good thing that we have a lot more people getting interested in spirituality. And even if it's a little bit misguided, it's a start, okay? But just know that it could get a little bit crazy out there with a lot of self-proclaimed X, Y, and Z gurus, okay? And be careful of it within. You can utilize it to have a lot of energy. The best way I would say to use this is to really do your research, do a lot of study, okay? And yeah, that it can lead to great things, because there's going to be drive to look at the hidden world, the spiritual world, to look at transcendental topics. So that's great. And then Ketu's in Virgo, and Virgo can be connected to health and healing. It's communicative. It's very workaholic. It can also be connected to our friends and enemies more, and our competition. And it can also be linked to animals. So Kate is in a journey with that. And if we look at what that really means as well, we're trying to find a balance between our 3D work and our spiritual work, okay? And this is a really big thing for people. So many people have, they've been working as a CEO in some crazy corporation, and then they have an awakening. And then a lot of them decided they're a guru by 3 months into their awakening, but not all. And a lot of people have been maybe on a path for some years. And I see this a lot, where we're realizing I'm a spiritual being and I don't feel well when I go to work anymore, and something's got to change. And COVID, of course, COVID time made a lot of people feel that. And that's why we now have a huge revolution of people working from home. But a lot of people struggle, and it's part of the journey for people, is how to have your 3D job that you do, and how to still transition into being more in your spiritual dharma. And so it's really interesting, because that's very much what the journey is right now. So this 18th month cycle, I see as the grand preparation. It's getting the balance right to transition right, because some people fail because they try and set up something that sounds more too ambitious for where they're actually at in their journey. And then they wonder why are people not following me? But actually it's because there's 4 million people all doing that at the same time. So I see a lot of people saying, oh, I'm Reiki 1 and I'm going to set up like a healing center. And it's like, well, you kind of need to practice. So I think that this is part of a reality check that's taking place with this axis. And, because people, when they have too much of the energy going into the Virgo side, they're overworking, so they never have time to cultivate spiritually. So you'll see that sometimes people are transitioning, but then they realize they don't have time to do sadhana every day. And this is something we all struggle with in our spiritual life, is the work spirit balance and finding the time to do both. So that's a collective thing that's up for us all. And yes, in terms of the nakshatras that Rahu's in, it's sitting in, because it's in Pisces, and the nakshatras of Pisces are very spiritual because they're the end of the journey of the zodiac. It's sitting in Revati at the moment, and Revati is kind of the star of wealth. It's got a lot of energy around creating a legacy to sow into the next cycle of the zodiac. It's got a transcendental liberation feel, but it's also about it, like Jupiter. It's understanding that wealth and spiritual wealth are not the same. You know, what is abundance, what is prosperity, but it's all understanding that when you grasp that right, you have both. And so, yeah, there could be still a lot of confusion for a while around, you know, there's a lot of confusion around material abundance and spirituality that's very erroneous. And so Rahu, while it's in Rebati, it's probably going to sink some fat ones in terms of teachings about that once it's finishing its process. But we'll also see probably a lot of this thing where people try to over monetize spirituality, and therefore they're becoming fixated on the material rather than the spiritual. So that may take place. It goes then into Uttarabhadrapada, and it's going backwards because the karmic nodes go backwards. And Uttarabhadrapada is great because Uttarabhadrapada has, it's going to be a big medicine in the coming years, which will not be fully seen just yet. But Uttarabhadrapada is the yogi. It's a generous yogi who's really understood how to ground and channel their fire and their wisdom, and has realized it's not about self-serving endeavor, but or being like this super spiritual influencer or something. It's about really being benevolent with the community. So that's going to become a journey with Rahu as it moves to the earlier degrees of Pisces. And then Ketu's in Chitra and then Hasta. And, or is it Hasta and Chitra? Yeah, I can't remember right now. So Chitra is quite innovative. It's probably one of the more technological nakshatras. And it's good at pioneering and making things, making clever design and quite stunning, prestigious design. It is a nakshatra of architects and visionaries. So there's something there that hasn't quite warmed up. And again, is quite focused thought, you know, and this is it. This can be the nuts and bolts of the golden age. Sacred activism. How do we create new systems, new communities tangibly? It's not just about being transcendental, but how do we make 3D life better? So Chitra may yield some things, and it may be that we're bringing things through from past lives of design, ways of strategizing. And there may be an apathy towards that, and then a warming up of that. And Hasta symbol is the hand. And so it's very good at DIY, palmistry, artwork, and things like Sekhem and Reiki. So it's like collectively, there may be a lot of people as they warm to the K2 energy, because these things will be challenged for a little while, but then they'll bring more medicine when we go through the journey of it. So there could be a lot more people starting to do Reiki and energy medicine and palmistry, things like that, creative process. So we probably see a bit of a leaping forward of people with that as well. Okay. And the eclipse dates, so we've got a very strong equinox period. That's one thing I'll say. We're going to have a lunar eclipse on the 25th of March. It's not so hardcore, but then there's the days after that. It's just like nearly every day there's something really big going on. And then on the 8th, we come into quite a lot of new energy. And what I would say is the depths of the Rahu, Ketu work, transcendentalism story starts to hit in possibly a more mean way, especially even at the beginning of April. So we'll talk about that in a bit. And we're going to be doing a journey with people because that is such potent astrology coming into the 8th of April. There's so much going on. And then we go another batch of teachings of all of that in the next batch of eclipses. So we have a lunar eclipse on the 18th of September, and on the 2nd, we have a solar eclipse. And I won't say too much about it yet, but there's a revisitation, but there's definitely an upgrade because there's already been some progression with some of the nakshatras. And it's almost like it's beautiful if you look at the stars and what they're doing over those different months, because you can see the journey to realization that's going on for people. So it's an exciting year in terms of, I think, this thing that people are looking for, this clarity in their dharma. And I will probably keep saying this over this presentation, because I really see where a lot of our students are at and what they need and what they're asking for. And it's in the stars. And that's what I think is this year is really about getting the balance right to give you the launch pad to lift off fully. And if you utilize the astrology wisely this year, it's going to, by even early 2025, you're going to be in pretty good place. People who aren't aware of this journey, from even late January 2025, it's like, what can I say? The initiation of that becomes a little bit more extreme, and not all people will get the codes, and some people will. And the new priestesshood is really being activated in 2025, but people who are already on the path, who know the codes, have this year to prepare. So to contextualize, I'll give an example of what Dharma Stars are doing. We're starting to do a lot of pilot and research and development of different projects. And so this year we've got little action teams doing things. And then in 2025, we're going to be presenting some of that to the outer world. And in many ways, how it looks is, if we want a golden age, and there are all these different amazing beings coming and waking up and all these things, who's holding space for them? And right now, you've got a lot of superficial, pseudo-spiritual people who don't really have proper space-holding tools for any real sort of community. And this is the opening of the portal for this. And so people who are already pretty humble and already doing the work, they can utilize this year's astrology to start to prepare and start to find their higher dharma, to get it. If they get in place and they know where they are in the ecosystem, it's going to help other people find their place. So this year is going to be big for that, I feel. Okay, quick one on Jupiter. So here is our great benefic Jupiter and some of the nakshatras that Jupiter will be in. Yeah, so we just came out of Jupiter retrograde. So I think a lot of people are really feeling this amazing forward motion that we've got right now. And we obviously had that Mercury retrograde at the end of the year. So then we had this 2024 feels like a new year vibe, because there was all this forward motion happening. So we're going to have Jupiter going into retrograde on the 9th of September. And that's why it's good to use the forward motion we've got now, because I'm going to be talking a little bit more probably about the eclipse. But that eclipse that we have in March, April, that's when things start to get a little bit more processy, okay? I think we've got a really good sort of 100 days or whatever at the moment to activate this year and to do a lot of work quite quickly. But then the curveballs are going to start coming a little bit more. And then Jupiter's going to retrograde later in the year. And what's interesting is it comes direct just as that portal is also happening, which is another Venus-Saturn conjunction, which I'm going to be talking about later, where I believe this next phase of the new priestesshood are going to go through deep initiation. So one of the big events of this year is Jupiter's moving from Aries to Taurus, okay? So this is going to bring its own teachings and insights for each person. Again, particularly, if you're in a Jupiter return or anything like that. And this can bring up a lot of expansion around the body, around what sustains us, even around what's comfortable for us, many, many things. And a lot of people may find that this year is quite good for them to upgrade what's sustaining them. So this is this pathway with Rahu and Ketu. How does my work sustain me to do my spiritual life, or does my spiritual life sustain me? And so Jupiter is giving everybody a little bit of an expansion to that, to how that might happen. Okay, so there's definitely that in the field. Very soon we have Jupiter coming into Bhairani from Ashwini. It's been in Ashwini for quite a while. And Ashwini is the first nakshatra of the zodiac. And Ashwini is very fast moving, expedient energy. So there's been this zippy, move energy. And that's, we see that also with Rahu sitting, being very spiritual in Pisces. So Bhairani its symbol is like a vulva. And it's about birthing things, but it's also called the star of restraint. So it's actually about cultivating enough energy not to just lose all the sacred energy from something. As a vulva, it's a portal of life, death, rebirth. So it's a good time to birth new projects. Some people who work with like sacred sexuality or sexual tantra have a lot of Bhairani in their charts. It's a very Martian sort of energy. It's quite fiery in its way. So you may have been sitting on some projects or ideas, and Ashwini is giving you this kind of fast thinking, and then Bhairani is coming to birth things, but it can be violent, okay? And Bhairani people sometimes are a little bit violent in their speech, things like that. So there's a good starter energy, but there's also this necessity to exercise restraint, okay? And then in April, the top right picture is Sanat Kumara or Kartikeya. And Kartikeya is the deity in many ways associated with Kritika. Kritika is the Pleiades, 7 sisters. And when we look at Kritika as a nakshatra, it's what we cut, it's a cutting energy. So it's quite violent cutting energy. But again, this is, in many ways, when we look at some sacred traditions, we look at things like the Chud practice in Tibetan Buddhism, it's a cutting practice. Sometimes we have to cut from our dualistic thinking. So the cutting nature can be beneficial because it's taking, again, what we don't need out of the picture. And this is interesting because we've had this energy that's completing from the Mayan year of the paths, and then it's almost like Kritika's right, like, yeah, get rid, do that. And that's kicking in just after the eclipse season. It's in the shadow of the eclipse season. So it's almost like what didn't serve, what's being rebooted or reshuffled will maybe become more clear. And then we have Rohini from June. So Jupiter being in Rohini, and Rohini is a lot about trading ideas. Rohini is demonstrated by carriage, and as such, Rohini is in many ways the first interpersonal nakshatra, and it's very much about voyaging to other lands to share your wares or to trade ideas. So we can see this gestation that's taking place in this launching, and this can be a really good time from the summer to be, well, summer in the global north, to be really weaving with other people and start collaborations and positive endeavors, because it's got that beautiful, beautiful energy to it. And then Mrigashira from August and what's interesting is Mrigashira is more about wandering. It can be linked. People who work with plant medicines, it was one of the nakshatras that's most connected to plant medicine and psychedelics. It's connected to Soma, the nectar of the gods. And so, but it can be this kind of seeking that we go under, and sometimes it's a little bit volatile because it's almost like flying off in the wind. But Mrigashira is interesting because that's kicking in a little bit before Jupiter goes retrograde. So we may go into a process of other research. It's almost like there's something tangible that's been brought through from the gestation of Guru Chandal last year. And there's like a batch of stuff for the first 9 months in some ways. And then it's almost like we may go into like another layer of inquiry with what we're working with. We may find that we are rethinking something we thought was certain is now going into like a more fluid phase where we realized, oh, that wasn't permanent, that's shifting. So that's quite nice in a way. It's a kind of wandering, seeking energy. Okay, and we're going to have a little break after this slide. So Saturn is going to retrograde in June, and then it's going to come back direct in November. And Saturn is currently sitting in Aquarius, and it will continue to do so through this year. And so we have a big karmic review. And if again we want to talk about golden age and societies, we're going through something collectively around that, about novel technologies, new ways of seeing, new ways of being, but it's not done yet, okay? And people are revisiting that in their own way. Saturn is this planet of sacrifice, of hard work, of karma, of time. So Saturn delivers its medicine through slowing things down and making us think, oh, you know, this is where we have things like, especially Rahu, is like wanting to race ahead. So Rahu might be going and, oh, I'm so spiritual and I'm this messiah. And then Saturn's going to be sitting in Aquarius just going, and you might want to start your own ashram or something, this futuristic ashram. And Saturn's just going to be sitting going, no, you're not doing that yet. That's really stupid. Okay. And again, where your Saturn is placed and where Aquarius is in your chart is going to mean that it's going to have different meanings. Presently, Saturn is in Shatabishak, and it's going to be there until the 7th of April. Then it goes into Purva Bhadrapada, then it goes, and then retrogrades, and then it comes back into Shatabishak. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Shatabishak and Purva Bhadrapada because they are ones to watch, and they come in again in next year's astrology, particularly Purva Bhadrapada. So Shatabishak is called, it's got many names, but one is the 100 Physicians, and another is the 100 Avaduts. So as the 100 Physicians, Saturn being here, it is a star, a set of stars that are all about healing. It's also about connecting to the void because its sign is like a circle with just a void in the middle. Shatabishak can be quite hermit-like. It's not totally overt, but it's there really. A lot of doctors or medics are Shatabishak. I am Shatabishak moon, so it's my strong nakshatra. So, and when I heard Dr. Arjun Pai talk more deeply about some of the hidden mysticism around Shatabishak, something landed for me. So he said it's actually known as the 100 Avaduts as well. And the 100 Avaduts, the Avadut is the central channel, and it's called the Avaduti. And the an Avadut is someone who's usually seen as quite eccentric, whose medicine may be a little bit different. They're not playing it normal. And, you know, the central channel and working with the, you know, with it as the central part of our spiritual essence, and the bit of us that leads the microcosm to the macrocosm is something that's growing in awareness as people understand it's important to study real Tantra, ancient Tantras. And the Avaduts were harbingers of a new time. They're gateways in. They're like alternative healers who helped bring a new time about. They're kind of ahead of their time, which is why they seem eccentric. And it's good because there's 100 of them. They're in Aquarius, which to me is very ambitious and good. So they may be hermit-like, but they're working together. And this is this whole thing of the growing telepathy of people and this understanding of the Kundalini and there's the central channel and making new ways, remembering the ancient ways, which were definitely not conformist, okay? So Saturn is there really learning, and also Shatabishak is people working with Shatabishak and who have strong Shatabishak energy can be good at astrology, especially Vedic astrology. So even sharing this right now and talking about astrology and sharing Vedic astrology is all very in keeping with where Saturn's placed, okay? And as it says here, Shatabishak natives are fascinated by the hidden aspects of life, okay? So yeah, it's not conventional Muggles world stuff. Purva Bhadrapada is it's like a twin energy. It's called the burning star, and in many ways, in a lot of mythology, we have like this concept of twins, the good twin and the evil twin. And obviously, in everything, we're here to reconcile what is good and what is evil. But part of the journey of Purva Bhadrapada, it's coming out of this Avadut energy. And what would I say actually is where Shatabishak might be more hidden and maybe a little bit more introverted, Purva Bhadrapada, certainly, if it's the kind of evil twin version, it really is wanting to be seen, because it's that dodgy, wonky shaman stuff. That is the bad twin in Purva Bhadrapada. It has cultivated the inner fire, okay? The sacred Kundalini energy, whatever way you want to call it. They are different, maybe. We might say Tumo is different to Kundalini. But anyway, we have this journey as we become properly a spiritual person, where our energetic centers working properly is how we use our power. And, you know, we have different sorts of Kundalini rising. And you have the people who have like a Kundalini rising, but it's a deflected rising. And their energy doesn't keep circulating properly. It actually goes back to residing around the sacral chakra. And so these are the people who you kind of say like, oh, I'm a man and I do sacred tantra work with women. It's very intimate, but actually they're not exercising good energetic hygiene. And so a lot of people are very in their ego, in their spiritual process, because it's still all about them. That's usually deflected arising, because the energy has gone back into the lower centers. They're not really an emanation of something deeply spiritual. And so that's the path of the good twin, evil twin, of the man with two faces, as it may be called, is how are you going to use your spirituality? You know, are you going to use it for the greater good, or is it just going to be self-serving? And so that is going to be this really big karmic journey for the collective once, you know, from the 7th of April. And guess what? Eclipse on the 8th of April, with all the other stuff going on. So we start to come into this deeper journey of, you know, the superficial spirituality, the over monetized spirituality, none of which is really spirituality because it's materialism, it's not spiritualism. That journey is going to really begin. And this is the thing I'm telling you about today, because if you're aware of it, you know, you're probably on the spaceship for, you know, one of the earlier liftoff points, because that's going to keep going into next year. And some of the transits that are happening and the conjunctions are going to be serving deeper medicine on this. So it's almost like there is this parting the waves. Who's the new priestesshood for real? And where's the kind of pseudo spiritual superficial thing? And this is the gateway. So a lot of people are probably going to have profound realizations. Some people are going to find they get burnt. People who are not using their energy wisely, there's probably going to be quite a lot more calling out of the inauthentic and that which is damaging other people, which is some of this wonky guru stuff, okay? So for anybody who, you know, I get a lot of people who are very perplexed about this stuff and upset about it. And even like New Year of 2024, it's not even New Year, but there was a whole new bunch of really weird Facebook posts and these people with these spiritual influencer adverts that are just utterly samsaric. But that's because it's coming up, it's getting ready for its healing. So it's going to look like anything when it goes into process and get really intensely crazy before the healing really takes place. So, and again, when we've got Rahu sitting, being really greedy about spirituality, you can see how the planets are creating this a very deep process about this that's starting to kick in, and it's going to kick in a lot more from April. Okay, so here is this energy activation portal that I feel that we're coming into, that really the celestial bodies have guided me to more than anything. And I'm not going to share too much about it now because it's bringing in a whole bunch of other concepts from Palachakra astrology, but I was doing some research recently and this was really confirmed with some of the other deities and different astrologies that we can apply to Venus and Saturn and how it connects to Palachakra astrology. So short version is every year pretty much, because Venus pretty much goes around, you know, the zodiac in a year, and it's always going to meet Saturn once a year pretty much. And so Venus-Saturn conjunctions are not something that's, you know, never, it only happens once every 800 years or anything. But what's happening is that the journey with Venus and Saturn is guiding us up. We're now, with Saturn being in Aquarius, we're now we're now getting to the end of the zodiac, and the teachings are more about moksha and transcendentalism, and Saturn's there, the master of karma, teaching about those things. And so Saturn is, it wants us to do well. It wants us to be materially well. It wants us to go through our karma, and that's why it will make us slow. It will knock us around a bit. It'll make us sacrifice things. And we all have to deal with Saturn. We all have karma. And this is what sometimes people don't see and don't work with. People don't want to have discomfort. They want everything really easy. They want it superficial. And Venus's shadow, Venus, of course, is like love and creativity and comfort and wealth. But it's also, its shadow is superficiality, right? And like shadowy, over lusty behavior, stuff like that. And so you can see a kind of difference to what they're looking at. And Saturn's the big guy, Saturn, yeah, come on. And so when we're coming up to these higher gateways with these different nakshatras and in Aquarius and Pisces, I feel that these Venus-Saturn conjunctions are like these gateways into these initiations beginning to help people to move out of languishing in their Venusian shadow and into what's going to be this portal into this new Venusian energy that's the gateway into 2027. That gateway truly begins in 2025 when I look at people's charts. But as I say, this year is already bringing in some important medicine. So we have a Venus-Saturn conjunction on the 23rd of March. And as you remember, there's all this other astrology happening over those dates during that eclipse. So it's massive because it's opening this gateway. It's coming in at equinox time. It's opening into these eclipse energies around getting our work life and our spiritual life balance, not being too excessive with greedy spirituality. All of these lessons are coming. And it's going to be sitting, when it hits on the 23rd of March, that's in Shadabishak, okay? And then by early April, Saturn's going to go up to Purva Bhadrapada. And then next year's Venus-Saturn conjunction is deeply in Purva Bhadrapada. So how I like to call this is like Venus is getting its bottom smacked by Saturn, okay? Because we all have sacrifices we have to make. We all have karma to atone for. And we all, whilst Venus will bring us great things, if we are, basically, I feel like there's a collective shadow, a collective karma, and you can see it in some people's charts with Venus. And if we start to understand the more altruistic, selfless version of Venus, rather than just like, oh, I'm not going to do it, it's not my flow, I'm going to manifest all this because I just want the good stuff. That's not the right way around, okay? Saturn's going to keep giving these little bottom slaps, because then the next one's going to be in Purva Bhadrapada, and it's like, hey, do you want to be the wonky guru, or are you going to be the really generous yogi who is a Shambhala warrior? So it's a parting of the waves. Who's a Shambhala warrior, who's not, okay? Who's going to be in that team? That is starting to be decided, and that's why we're launching the Shambhala Warrior course in February, and we take it through those portals, because it's helping people to actually understand the values. Because nobody's a bad person. People have just forgotten, they've got karma, and they go into what's easy, okay? And that's afflictions and limitations. If we are not selfless, if we're too in it's mine, all of those things, that's not really spirituality, yeah? It's still karma playing out. So that seems to be some of the big teachings of getting this new priestesshood ready, who remember this concept of bodhicitta. And bodhicitta is this shared aspiration to alleviate suffering for all sentient beings, to realize that the spaceship can only leave when we all get on it. And I mean the spaceship to transcendentalism, to moksha, to a golden age, to Shambhala. So it's going to be interesting times. And that's why it's lovely giving this transmission today, because people who are ready to hear this will hear this now and be able to use this year wisely, and to be able to hold space for others, and to start to become more altruistic if they're not already. I'm sure we can all be more altruistic. And yeah, and then I think the stakes become higher next year. It will be who wants to just stay and call this thing spirituality, but it's actually really ego, and who's really going to start to work with their blueprint, their karma, their dharma, their cultivation, to step into the Siddhic path, which goes beyond the material and the ego. Okay, so it's very exciting if you're boring like me. So, so this comes into the eclipse journey, and then we are going to have an eclipse journey to help you all understand those portals, because I've already started looking at the astrology for every single day over about 3 weeks through those eclipses and through these conjunctions, and it's massive. The dancing between the systems is amazing. So it's going to be a really powerful time to do some very deep karmic work. Okay, and then just the rest of the year. So we mentioned the eclipse in April, big. And yeah, we have then the deeper part of this conjunction now coming in. They're still sitting together. They're not in full conjunction, but now the Purva Bhadrapada, the good twin, evil twin, has been birthed. And it just so happens to be Mercury retrograde in all happens as well. The good news is that Venus is moving out of Aquarius in April, and then it goes to sit in Pisces. So Venus loves being in Pisces. Venus is happy there. And so if we're mindful about this journey, there's a real possibility to get in touch with the pure essence of our enlightened Venusian qualities, because Venus is then transitioning away from Mars, away from Saturn, and then it's sitting there where it loves to be. So that's really beautiful, and I think it can be quite transcendental if people have really done the work. Again, why we're going to do an eclipse journey that leads to just around that time to take you into this Venus portal. And then on April the 14th, we have the Vedic New Year. So again, we're still, it's all in little stages. Then on the 1st of May, Jupiter is going to go into Taurus, into Kritika. So we're coming out of the eclipse period, and there's lots of cutting. And also there's this new thing, because it can be starting to reassess how we sustain ourselves. What is our home life like? What are relationships like? What's our sensuality like? How do we use our sensuality wisely? All of those things. Then in June, Rahu's going to go into Uttarapada, where it's really going to start to look at this generosity, this altruistic yogi energy, and no doubt make a real mess of it for a little while, but then maybe leading by excesses. Then we have the new galactic spin, then the day out of time. And then, of course, we've got the other eclipse season in September and October. The lunar eclipse on the 18th, a lot of the planetary activity is sitting in Virgo. So a lot of the karma and the insights and the planets rubbing each other up different ways is sitting around that place of work. And so this K2 is starting to bring us into this knowing of past life wounds that have make us overwork or be really lazy, or not in the right balance for that. We're going to be starting to look at that. And what's interesting is on that day, the destiny point in the chart is sitting right there. So that's the real teaching on that one, is work life. And when we have our destiny point somewhere, we're where we're supposed to be with that thing. And therefore, if we look at that day, it could be a portal for understanding. We can do ceremony with that about what is my life looking like right now, and observe our work life and what all the planets are bringing to that. And who knows, we'll maybe do another eclipse journey then. And so the energy of the celestial bodies is really like, it's illuminating our work. And so what that really is saying for me is, you can't just bypass having this human condition as well. And what is your work life? Because there are people who just don't do any dharma. It's kind of like, I'm spiritual, but I'm not really pulling my weight. And I'm not, and of course, there are some people pulling their weight is sitting in the cave for 25 years, but it's not everybody. And so there may be some reality checks. And, for some people, it's going to be saying, like, you need to work less. You do need to be more spiritual. But it's going to be illuminating what that is we need to learn there. And we're saying you can't just bypass this journey. You really have to look at this right now. And then in the 3rd of October, Saturn is going to go back into Shadabishak. So there's more of this cultivation of that hidden knowledge, which is good, I feel. And so, yeah, so then I've written a big year for making sense of one's spiritual quest, which may expose delusional thinking for those who are ready to listen. And then furthermore, we have this opening into this deeper balance of the masculine, feminine, the yin and the yang. And this is this legacy of the 2022 and 2023 eclipses. So, final synthesis. Finding one's dharma is a good way to mitigate lower karmas, so more heavy ripenings this year. Rahu Pisces may help spirituality, but it could also be too watery. So you also need to make sure you do have things to ground you. And you can find that from Virgo through finding things like selfless service or, working with the earth, things like that, so that you don't go into a kind of delusional haze, especially if you are somebody who's got practical work to have. Finding those outlets also to keep that balance will be important. So I said also sadhana, grounded approach, doing mantra, sadhana, things like that will be really important also to keep afloat. Getting the balance right with work and spirituality, we've already spoken quite a lot of that. So for those who don't rush it, opportunities to start to transition to one's true sacred activism will come forth. And as I say, some people it won't be this year, but if you've got the karma to be listening to this is probably already coming for you. We are beginning to go into a collective journey around values, authenticity, integrity, and responsibility in spirituality. So find teachers and Sangha who represent this. This is a time to be judicious. Because as I said earlier, there may be quite a lot of people proclaiming X, Y, and Z, because Rahu is going to make them actually make a bit of a fool of themselves. Because, the people who are the self-professed chosen ones, that's not normally the hallmark of an enlightened person. If you read any of the ancient texts or look at the really authentic lineages, you will not see people are seeing for that, okay? And they've usually switched off from the human condition so much that they don't even notice anymore, right? So do make sure that you don't just go into the cosmic sweetie shop and get fried and spend all your money on the wrong stuff, because there's probably going to be quite a lot of stuff going out there that's a little bit not great, okay? So, there are plenty of good people around, but see, each person has their unique karma and their unique people and teachers to find them. So it doesn't often, it can happen and you just know it, but it also sometimes you need to test that teacher to see, are we a good match? Things like that, okay? So the manipulative versus the altruistic decisions we have to make, this is becoming clearer. This portal, which is really, as I said, going to increase in 2025. I think I mentioned the eclipse journey we're going to do enough times, so I'm not going to say that again. And yeah, just so you know, I'm going to have a lot more interviews and free videos coming up in the coming months. Also, Dharma Stars is going to be, we've got our mystery school in Scotland. We're linked to the Shambhala Warrior Training. We've got some Druid elders coming with us. We are going to be spending quite a chunk of this year in Glastonbury. And we look forward to weaving with people. If you've got any ideas and want to co-create with us, or you'd like to know more, please get in touch. Thank you so much for listening, everybody. And I'm just going to see if anybody's got any questions or input.